Let's listen to the famous book Ethan Frome by Edith Wharton. Level B1, Oxford Reading University.
Part 1. As an engineer, I was sent to the town of Starkfield, Massachusetts to build a new powerhouse. I had to spend the whole winter there because the workers were on strike. I stayed with a woman named Mrs. Ned Hale. She was a widow and lived with her aged mother. In Starkfield, I first met Ethan Frome. Even though he was a middle-aged man, he looked old and sickly. His back was injured and he couldn't walk straight. I learned from the locals that he had gotten into some kind of accident approximately 20 years ago. He kept away from people, and I rarely heard him speak. One day, I had to hire him as a driver to get me to the powerhouse. On our way, we got caught in a horrible snowstorm, and Ethan suggested we stay at his farmhouse for the night. That day, I found the clue to the mystery of Ethan Frome's unhappy life. This is his story. 1. The night was clear and still, and the village rested under a thick layer of snow. The streets had long since emptied out. However, the local church was still full of life. The youth had gathered there to dance. Young Ethan Frome was headed there too. As he came closer to the church, he heard the sounds of music and cheerful laughter and saw gentle light flowing out of the windows. He slowly walked to the window and looked inside. In the very center of the room, a young man was dancing with a lovely black-haired girl. Ethan's eyes were fixed on them. The man was Dennis Eady, the son of a rich shopkeeper. Ethan had never had any respect for him. The man was well known for playing around with women. But Ethan disliked Dennis even more as he watched him dance with the girl he admired. The girl was Mattie Silver, the cousin of Ethan's wife, Zena. She had lived in his farmhouse for a year, helping around the house and looking after Zena, who was ill. Every once in a while, she was allowed to go into town to entertain herself, and it was Ethan who had to take her home. At first, he hated to walk the extra 2 miles to the village and back after a hard day on the farm, but soon he came to appreciate those rare moments when they were alone. Mattie was not only a girl of incredible beauty, she was also as cheerful and innocent as a child, and clever too. Ethan frequently talked to her about complex matters such as the wonders of nature, and she always responded sensibly. It wasn't long before he grew attached to her. He was watching Mattie dance and suddenly remembered his wife's words. She cannot do anything properly. Besides, I don't want the people in the neighborhood to think that I am keeping her from getting married. We need to hire a new girl when she leaves. The doctor says I need someone to take good care of me. Zena's complaints became more frequent, and eventually, she became determined to replace Mattie with another girl. 2. The dance was over, and the crowd of young people flowed out into the street. Ethan heard Mattie's sweet voice and was embarrassed to appear to her all of a sudden. He hurried to hide behind the trees. Mattie stood alone, looking around confusedly, as if she were searching for someone. Then a man's hand fell upon her shoulder. "Nobody has come to pick you up today, Matt?" asked Dennis Eady, laughing. "I'll give you a ride then. Let me untie my horses." Ethan's heart sank. He could tell by the look on Mattie's face that she doubted whether or not she should ride with Dennis. Then she turned sharply to run away. "Good night," she cried, waving her hand at Dennis. Ethan was pleased to see her reject Dennis Eady. He left his hiding spot and followed her lonely figure. He reached her at the edge of a forest. "I thought you weren't coming today," she said in surprise. She laughed cheerfully and took him by the arm. Ethan would be glad to stand there with her all night if he could. They walked up to the bottom of a hill, and Mattie stood still. "A lot of people were riding down this hill before the moon set," she said. "We can ride here tomorrow if you want," suggested Ethan. The girl's face lit up, and she pressed closer to him. "That would be wonderful, Ethan," she cried. "You heard that Ned Hale and Ruth Varnum had gotten engaged, didn't you? They came here too and nearly crashed." She pointed at a tall tree at the bottom of the hill. "We all feared they were killed." Ethan could feel Mattie's body shake all over. "Don't worry, Matt," he said. "I'll take you down safely." Ethan couldn't escape the thought that Maddie was going to leave him soon. "Maybe you would have noticed me if you hadn't been involved in a conversation with Dennis," he said. "You know, people say that you're going to marry him and leave the farmhouse." "Or maybe it's Zena who can't wait for me to leave," said Maddie, annoyed. Her cheerful mood was gone. "I'm well aware that I'm not of much help in the house. Has Zena told you anything about me? You had to warn me, unless you want me to go too?" "No," cried Ethan, but he couldn't tell her that he wanted her to stay with him forever. They walked the rest of the way silently, and he no longer held her by the arm. Zena opened the door to them and looked hard into the total darkness of the night. She held the lamp at the level of her chin, and the ugly features of her high-boned face stood out sharply in the light. She looked sickly and annoyed. She let them in and announced it was time for bed. "I'll stay up for a while," said Ethan. "I have some farm accounts to go over before bed." "The fire's been out for a long time," said Zena. "You'll freeze to death." Ethan exchanged a quick look with Maddie. There was a warning in her eyes. "You're right," said Ethan quietly and followed his wife up the stairs. 3. The following morning, Ethan was busy cutting wood in the yard. He could think the most clearly in the biting cold. The previous night, he had gone to bed without exchanging a single word with Zena. He hurried to blow out the candle because he hated to see his wife's face. His eyes were fixed on the thin line of light flowing out of Maddie's room. He tried to catch the tiniest sound from her room, but all he could hear was his wife's heavy breathing. Why hadn't he kissed Maddie that night? His thoughts then shifted to Zena and Maddie's complex relationship. Indeed, Zena's attitude to her cousin had been cold ever since she moved in with them after her parents' death. Whenever Zena saw Ethan and Maddie together, she grew annoyed at once. Ethan worked hard till the afternoon. When he returned to the farmhouse, he saw his wife sitting at the table. She was wearing her finest brown dress. "Are you going somewhere, Zena?" he asked. "My pains are growing stronger by the day," she replied. "I have an appointment with a doctor in Bettsbridge tomorrow. If you are too busy to drive me over, ask your hired man Jotham Powell to do it for me." "Jotham will drive you over for sure," said Ethan. He realized that he had been looking hard at Maddie for a while. He was filled with excitement at the thought of staying alone with her for the whole evening. He turned his eyes to his wife with an effort. She sat opposite the window, and the shiny snow reflected on her pale face, making it look even more bloodless than usual. 4. Right after Zena's departure, Ethan went to the village to deliver the wood to Andrew Hale. Ethan was cheerful. He was going to spend a whole evening without listening to Zena's complaints. One could never say that his marriage with Zena was happy. She first appeared in his life when he was left alone to take care of his sick mother. It was right after his father had died. His mother was very weak and hardly ever spoke, and her being silent drove Ethan mad. After several silent months, Zena's talk seemed music to his ears. His mother grew worse and eventually passed away. Ethan was so frightened of being left alone in the silent house again that he convinced Zena to stay with him, forever. They were going to move to a bigger city as soon as Ethan had sorted out some money issues. But soon, Zena developed the same symptoms as Ethan's mother and fell silent too. Their happy life in the city was never meant to be. He arrived at Andrew Hale's farmhouse and left his sleigh in the yard. Andrew was an honest man, and Ethan respected him deeply. "I am very embarrassed to bother you, sir," said Ethan in a low voice. "But you'd really help me out if you could pay me $50 or so." But Andrew had to disappoint him. "You see, Ethan, this month has been pretty rough," he replied. "I was going to ask you for some extra time on that payment. I've spent plenty of money on that house for my son and his future wife." He apologized, and Ethan had to leave. It was getting late when he walked past the spot where he and Maddie had stood together the previous night. He noticed a dark figure at the door of a wooden house. As he walked closer, he realized it was Ned Hale kissing his bride, Ruth Varnum. As they heard him come, they separated and escaped into the night. What does it matter to him if they are caught together? Thought Ethan. Everyone knows they are engaged. Unlike me, Ned doesn't have to hide his feelings. Ethan made it back to the farmhouse. Maddie opened the door and gave him a gentle smile. She wore a lovely, colorful ribbon in her hair. They went into the kitchen where Maddie had set the table. On the edge of it stood a red glass dish with fruit. They were enjoying their dinner when Zena's cat jumped onto the table to get to the bottle of milk. Maddie waved her hand, and the cat backed away, pushing the red dish onto the floor. It broke into many tiny pieces. "Oh no!" cried Maddie. "Ethan, what shall we do? Zena will be so mad! It was a wedding present from her relative, and she never let me use it." "Please stop crying, Matt," asked Ethan. He gathered the pieces together and put them in the farthest corner of the cupboard. "If I glue the pieces together, Zena will never notice what has happened," he thought, and smiled at Maddie. "Don't worry, Matt. I can fix it. Let's finish our dinner." She gave him a grateful look. 5. After dinner, they seated themselves by the fire to rest and talk. Maddie was in Zena's chair, and for a moment it seemed to Ethan that he saw his wife's pale face. Maddie grew uncomfortable as well and changed her position. She sat at the table and started sewing. Soon the pressure disappeared and they began talking simply and easily. Ethan felt careless and at peace. "We were going to ride tonight, Matt," he said, and Maddie laughed. "I thought you'd forgotten." "No, I didn't," said Ethan. "The night is too dark, though. We shall go tomorrow if the moon is bright." "That would be wonderful," she said in an excited voice. Ethan drew his chair closer to the table. "Guess who I saw kissing today?" he asked cheerfully. Maddie turned red all of a sudden. "You saw Ruth and Ned," she said in a low voice. "I think they'll get married soon," said Ethan, and added after a while, "And so will you." "Why do you keep talking about my marriage?" she asked. "Is it because Zena has something against me and wants me to go? Has she said anything to you?" "Not a single word," said Ethan. His heart sank. "Well, I guess I'm just nervous," said Maddie, laughing. Ethan was glad to hear that. Suddenly he felt very brave. He picked up the edge of the cloth on which she was working. Then he bent down to kiss it gently. Maddie sat still and watched him closely as if she was waiting for something. Then they heard a noise behind their backs. The cat jumped off Zena's chair and ran away. "Zena will be back tomorrow," thought Ethan. "This is the only evening we'll ever have just for ourselves, and it's been a dream of mine for so long." Returning to reality was very painful. Maddie seemed to notice the sudden change in his mood. She rolled up the cloth, stood up, and moved slowly toward the stairs. "Good night, Maddie," said Ethan quietly. "Good night, Ethan," she responded, and went up the stairs. He heard the door of her room close. "I haven't even touched her hand once," he thought. 6. The following morning, Ethan went to the village to buy glue, but he never got to fix the broken dish. When he returned to the farmhouse, Zena was already there. She had gone upstairs and locked the bedroom door. Dinner was ready, but Zena never showed up. Ethan called out to her many times, but she ignored him. As he walked into their bedroom, he saw his wife sitting at the window all dressed up. "Aren't you coming down?" he wondered. "I'm too weak to eat," she said. Ethan could tell by her voice that she was annoyed. "I'm too weak to do anything. My illness has gotten worse." "Is this what the new doctor told you?" asked Ethan. "Yes," said Zena, and fell quiet for a while, looking hard at him. "He says I need an operation. The doctor says I mustn't bother myself with housework at all. That's why we'll have to hire a girl. I've already found one. She's coming over tomorrow." "I can't afford that, Zena," exclaimed Ethan. He was out of his mind. "Of course you can't afford your wife's essential needs," she cried out. "Even though I lost my health looking after your mother." Suddenly, Ethan felt frightened and embarrassed of the cruel words they exchanged with each other so easily. He made an effort to calm himself down. "Zena, I can't afford to hire that girl for you, but I'll try to help you with the housework." "You have the money from Andrew Hale, don't you?" she asked. "There was a misunderstanding," he responded in a shaking voice. "So you don't have it," concluded Zena, and gave him an odd look. Well, I guess we'll be fine, since we won't have to feed Maddie anymore. What? Shouted Ethan. Xena laughed in an unfamiliar manner. Obviously, we aren't keeping two girls. Maddie is not just an employee, Ethan broke out. She is your relative. You can't treat her like that. I've kept her for a whole year, said Xena. Let her bother someone else for a change. She's going as soon as the other girl arrives. We don't have enough room for two. Ethan was speechless. Till that day, he had managed to remain indifferent to Xena's complaints. But now she was going to take the one thing that was of the most value to him, and there was nothing he could do about it. Maddie's gentle voice called for dinner. I'm going to lie down and rest, said Xena mildly, and Ethan left the bedroom.
Stay with us for part 2.
English audiobooks, courses with your favorite movie heroes, awesome word games, and much more. The whole English classroom for your level in one place in the EWA app. There are thousands of English books you can read, grammar and vocabulary lessons with popular movie characters. Stop wasting your time. Go to appewa.com right now.
If you're not subscribed to our channel, you might never see our videos again because of the YouTube algorithm. Press like and hit the bell button to always get our free audiobooks first. Books like this one.